Thank you, Ann. All right, everybody. It's going to take about 2 seconds to set up. And here we go. Diving into single-page applications. If you didn't know, I gave this speech at Code Camp last weekend, and this is a tiny little excerpt from it. I'll be rehashing it at a couple of user groups in the near future, so if you feel like you want to learn a little bit more, then feel free to go to them. For example, I'm going to the .NET user group. I'm not even sure when, actually. And I'll be focusing on .NET technologies and how they can help you make single-page applications. And I'll be going to the JavaScript user group next month, I believe the 29th, which is a Thursday. And I will be focusing solely on JavaScript things, so there will be no Microsoft. All right, moving on. So, today we're going to be going over basically 3 things. We're going to want to learn what is a single-page application, why should you care about it, and how does it work. We're going to summarize it in 1 sentence that we get. So, what is a SPA? I'm going to call it a SPA because I don't like the term single-page application. Well, basically we have the performance of a desktop application, the responsiveness of desktop application, but the portability of a website so that it can be displayed anywhere. It's not one single technology, so I can't get up here and say, hey, there's a new version of Silverlight and here are the new individual specific things. It's a general philosophy, not one thing that you can grab, you download some example somewhere and then plug in your stuff and then that's all there is to it. So like I said, it's a general philosophy or approach to designing things. So Velociraptor wonders, if I follow the single-page application guidelines, but I have 2 pages, do all of a sudden I not have a single-page application? Well, you do. That's not the whole idea. That's why I don't like the name SPA, because it isn't about having 1 page. It's about the idea of not posting back to the server, going back and forth. So in a normal website, go to a site, click on something, and you can see a tiny little flash. Everything goes away, and then you get a whole new page. You've gone back to the server and said, hey, build the page on the server and give it back to me. Well, a single-page application says, I have all the HTML, I have all these templates and all this JavaScript that I need. All I'm going to do is go to the server and say, hey, give me the tiny little bit of information I need to display this particular widget. And then I will figure out how to take that little bit of JSON or XML and plop it into my template and then display it to the user. So you have a really responsive, very quickly responding site. So like I said, SPA is a bad term in my opinion. It emphasizes the single page aspect, which is unimportant, and it de-emphasizes all the other aspects. I've seen it, people say that it's kind of a transitional term, so maybe we'll have different terminology later when it's something that actually makes sense and doesn't focus on having 1 page. I think maybe we should just call them apps, because that's kind of what they are. They're like Silverlight applications, they're like Flash applications, they're like Java applets, they're like apps on your phone. They don't host back to some servers. Most of the work is done on the client side, on your machine. Of course, I'm open to other suggestions. I'm just going to call it SPA first. So why should you care? The web has been moving in this direction for a very long time, and websites are expected to do a lot more and respond a lot more quickly. We're clicking here and pulling this and dragging that. When you think of something like Facebook, you can think of more along the lines of what a single-page application is like. Because when you hit enter, it seems like instantaneously your reply or your comment or whatever is there. Maybe not necessarily. Maybe if I'm posting on Brett's wall and I say something instantaneously, it looks like I posted it, but maybe Brett won't get it for another minute because he hasn't refreshed his page or whatever, it hasn't updated yet, that kind of thing. Websites are expected to perform a lot better and do a lot more tricky things, and of course we have the proliferation of phones and tablets. Now why would that emphasize apps? Well, there are a bunch of reasons why, but there are a couple of things. Mainly the things like network and download speeds are going to be a little bit slower, so we're going to want to rely on the client machine to do a little bit more, and maybe just talk a little bit over the wire, sending just tiny bits of information. So is a single-page application right for you? Yes, if you need a highly responsive site, lots of moving parts, very dynamic, or a mobile. No, if you have a very static site, a very mom-and-pop site, or something that's very boring and linear, like just filling out a form. I said this at Code Camp, and someone said, hey, I work for a bank, we have a really super awesome site, it's doing a lot of cool things. All right, everybody, every bank site except for yours. When in doubt, do it the cool, fun way. Make a spot, just get it fun. So how do they work? You have a very fat client and a very lean server. meaning the server takes care of the tiniest little bit of things that are kind of important that you don't really want on the client side, passwords, authentication, and you keep a lot of the most important data over here. And all it does is serve up the data to the client. The client does as much of everything else that you can possibly make it do. The biggest thing is the server doesn't serve pages. It serves bits of information and the templates that you need for the client to put it all together. Interaction causes modules to load, not pages. You click on something, and some tiny little bit is going to load, not the whole page going to refresh. Data, HTML, scripts, things like that, that's what's going to be sent over the wire. Pages are not generated by the server, like I said, it's kind of a key aspect here. The server has endpoints with which to interact. You say, okay, I want the information for this sale, and you get a tiny little bit of information, and you place that information into a template. So based architecture. Now, like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Your single-page application may be really huge, or maybe kind of small. Maybe you need 3 of these. Maybe you need 2 of these. Maybe you need all of these. Maybe you need more. Maybe you need something a little deeper. Like I said, it's not a concrete thing. So maybe I'm missing some things that you would like to put in your single-page application you think are really useful. But the things I came up with are dependency resolution, loading, bootstrapping, figuring out what you need to load. Because if you're going to have only one page, well, you might have 500 million lines of JavaScript. You don't really want to just load it all up at once and say, okay, now we can deal with that whole site because we're loading all the JavaScript files up right on the one page that gets loaded. Probably not a very good idea. So you have to figure out what gets loaded when. And it becomes complicated the bigger your single-page application is. AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, really important. I would imagine you're going to have to use it if you're going to be using a single-page application. It just doesn't make any sense. Endpoints, you could use something like MVC so that you're only getting the tiny little bits of information that you need right across the wire. Templates, binding, MVVM are kind of connected, but you have to find out a way to display the information that you've got. You've got the information on a person, first name John, last name Doe, height 5'8", weight 190, things like that. But you only get those tiny little bits of information. And how to display that? Who knows? Maybe you're just filling out a form. Maybe your application takes that little bit of information and turns it into a makeshift person on the page. Who knows? But that is how that kind of thing works. The server serves you up that tiny little bit of information, and the client figures out the rest. Offline, hopefully, if you really have this enterprise application on it and important stuff, you might be able to have it work offline as much as possible. You might use local storage. You might just keep things, if you have a tiny amount of information, you might just keep them in memory in the browser. But if you have a little more, you might put it into local storage. So you don't necessarily have to communicate with the server very frequently. You might just want to update them when something really important happens, once every minute or 5 minutes, something like that. And testing. A lot of people have never tested JavaScript before. You think about that, you're like, unit testing my JavaScript. That's crazy. I don't want to do that. Well, if you're going to have an enterprise application and you're going to do most of your work in JavaScript, I highly recommend that you unit test your JavaScript. So at some point in time, you're just going to have to go, you know what? We have to learn QUnit, and we have to learn require and all this other stuff because it's important. And if you really want to make this successful and work, then I would highly, strongly, really emphatically suggest unit testing your JavaScript. So, in conclusion, single-page applications, or SPAs, are the culmination of a very long movement. Things like starting from Java applets, passing through, even the iframe was technically a way to kind of move us in that direction, way back in the 90s. The idea was not having to refresh the entirety of the page, refresh a tiny little bit of it. And the XML HTTP object, and then the proliferation of asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Silverlight is exactly like what this is. A lot of the concepts in single-page applications are what you learn in Silverlight. And what really is Silverlight? It's a way to push as much of it onto the client as possible. All of these things were part of the wave toward creating single-page applications. So I would also say that they're kind of the wave of the future when it comes to web applications. So these are really things, I think that it's really important to understand these concepts, to really kind of get out ahead of it and be able to implement them yourself, because I think this is going to be very important in the future. That's all I got for you.
Thank you, Vince. Good job. Okay, do you have any setup to do?